Page 9. A presidential decree of May 1945. But the process of restitution is still in its initial stages. Economic rehabilitation is thus not yet accomplished. Nevertheless, the Council of Jewish Communities were confident that in due course Jews would take their place in the life of the Republic, and that as intelligent and diligent people, they would be a useful and valuable element in the community. Slovakia, 29. Of the 135,000 Slovakian Jews, some 40,000 had already been lost to Hungary under the Vienna Arbitration in 1938. The usual rigid anti-Jewish measures were introduced during the war. 5,000 more Jews managed to leave the country, and of the remaining 90,000, 72,000 were deported. A further 10,000 escaped to Hungary, and 8,000 went into hiding or fought as partisans, of whom 3,000 were killed. 8,000 returned from deportation, 10,000 from territories restored by Hungary, and 7,000 from countries where they had served as soldiers or in other capacities, so that with the 5,000 survivors of partisan activity and those emerging from their hiding places, there are now only 30,000 left of the original 135,000. Of this 30,000, only 24,000 now profess the Jewish faith. The balance, in the belief that it might save their lives, accepted conversion. It is thought that most of them will revert to Judaism. 30. As a result of 6 years of Nazi education and propaganda, and partly on account of fear of having to restore to Jews property, on which their livelihood may now depend, anti-Semitism and hostility to Jews is evident. The policy of the state in facilitating cooperative enterprises renders it difficult for Jews, no less than others, who were in retail business to gain a footing. The granting of business licenses is often subject to conditions, as to knowledge of languages and possession of capital, which the Jews cannot meet. 31. There are many, particularly in Slovakia, who wish to emigrate. Zionism was always strong there, and it is estimated that at the present time 60% of the Jews wish to leave. This number is likely to diminish if and when the restitution of property enables them to become established. In the Czech provinces, several hundred young Jews organized in the Hekalets, which is a Zionist organization for training young persons for life in Palestine, are determined to go there. There are 200 to 300 orphans whose relatives abroad desire to take care of them. In Czechoslovakia, the majority of the survivors have during the Nazi persecution lost all their near relatives. 32. The government and leaders of intellectual movements are repudiating fiercely the ideology of anti-Semitism as, page 10, incompatible with the principles of a civilized nation. In consequence, anti-Semitism is likely to diminish, and if this is accompanied by restitution of property, we think that a considerable number, including many who now profess a desire to migrate, will decide to remain in the country in which they were so deeply rooted. Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Yugoslavia. Romania, 33. We have been obliged to base our report with regard to these countries solely on documents, and on such evidence as we were able to obtain from outside their borders. 34. In 1939, Romania had a Jewish population of around 850,000. We were told that today, within the country's present borders, there are 335,000, the largest Jewish community in any European country. During the war, all the German racial laws were put into effect. Many thousands of Jews were killed, and most of those who survived were forced to do slave labor. Few retained any of their possessions. Their re-establishment in the economic life of the country presents great difficulties. For example, throughout the war, Jewish youth received no technical instruction, and the attitude of the non-Jewish population is unfriendly. In November 1945, 50% of Romanian Jews were unable to make a living and were receiving assistance from the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. The government, we understand, sympathizes with the Jews and has passed laws providing for the restitution of their properties and rights, but their enforcement meets with similar difficulties to those met elsewhere. The dispossession of the present occupants, from what they have begun to regard as their own homes and from the businesses on which they now depend, for their livelihood encounters inevitable resistance. Enforcement of the laws which has commenced is in itself a cause of hostility towards Jews and, as in Poland, the presence of Jews in the government and in the police creates a certain amount of hostile feeling against the Jewish community. 35. It is impossible for us to form any reliable estimate from the information we have received of the number of Jews who wish or will be impelled to leave Romania, but there are indications that many wish to do so. In the Regat, less affected by deportations, a larger proportion will doubtless wish to stay. Indeed, we have heard that from the country as a whole, some 150,000 have already made formal application for Palestine certificates. Page 11. Hungary, 36. In the territory that is Hungary today, there were in 1939 about 400 Jews. This was a country whose people suffered severely from deportations. It is estimated that there are now about 200,000 Jews, of whom 90% live in Budapest. While some Jews occupy government positions and some, we are told, are profiting on inflation and the black market, the lot of the vast majority is shown by the following figures. In 1945, 77% of all the Jews in Budapest were in receipt of clothing relief from Jewish organizations. 46% received food, 66% money, and 14% help towards payment of rent. There is no legal discrimination against them, but owing to the failure to implement government decrees, many Jews who lost everything have received little by way of restitution. Our information is that there has been a sharp rise in anti-Semitism. Propaganda in this direction has been carried on for 25 years and is still continuing. Efforts to recover property have the usual repercussions. Participation by Jews in the government and their membership in the secret police cause the same reaction as in Poland. 37. All these factors and the deterioration of the country's economy have led to the conclusion that only the thoroughly assimilated, the older people and the Jewish communists and socialists will wish to remain, that is to say, 30,000 to 40,000 or less than 25% of the Jewish population. 38. As in Poland, the chief desire seems to be to get out. The United States appears to be the first choice for immigration, but as it is appreciated that under the existing laws, large-scale immigration there is impossible, between 50,000 and 60,000 Jews have expressed a wish to go to Palestine. They feel that better opportunities exist for migration from military zones, and consequently many hundreds of Hungarian Jews are still outside of Hungary and many are making their way into the American-occupied zones of Germany and Austria. 39. We received evidence that both in Romania and Hungary Zionist organizations are active, and that the movement westwards is well directed by those who received first-rate training in illegal activities during the war. Their organizations have been kept intact and now form part of the Hungarian and Romanian Central Jewish Committees. On these committees, the Zionists appear to have the controlling influence, and non-Zionist bodies now seem to accept the necessity of large-scale emigration, while doing what they can to improve conditions for those Jews who wish to remain. Funds for relief are supplied by the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. They are paid to the Jewish Central Committees in each country, and as the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee cannot place any representatives east. Page 12. Of Vienna, there is little, if any, control over their expenditure. Bulgaria, 40. In Bulgaria, compared with other countries, the number of Jews who died as a result of Nazi persecution was small. There are now some 45,000 Jews in the country as compared with 50,000 in 1939. They were subjected to the whole range of discriminatory legislation, confiscation and forced sales of property, and compulsory labor service. Again, though such legislation has been repealed, the position of Jews compares badly with that of other citizens, and the machinery for securing restitution of property is cumbersome and slow. There is, it appears, no anti-Semitism in Bulgaria, but in common with those who do not like the present regime, all non-communist Jews desire to leave the country. The majority, apart from those benefiting from support of the government, are impoverished and embittered. They desire to emigrate to any country where there is a possibility of a fresh start. 12,000 of them have registered for emigration to Palestine, but on our present information, it appears doubtful whether they will be afforded facilities for leaving. Yugoslavia, 41. Of approximately 75,000 Jews in Yugoslavia before the war, it is estimated that about 11,000 remain. Their economic condition does not, it is believed, differ from that of the other inhabitants of the country, and their attitude towards emigration appears to depend on their political outlook, and not on fears of anti-Semitism of which no evidence exists. It is thought that about 2,750 Jews wish to emigrate to Palestine, and 550 or so to other countries, chiefly to the United States. Italy, 42. The present Jewish population appears to be in the region of 46,000, of whom 30,000 are native Jews, with regard to whom no special problem arises. There are some 6,500 non-Italian Jews in the 4 principal centers, in the south of Italy under the administration of UNRRA, and in other parts there are further centers containing about 5,500. An additional 4,000 non-Italian Jews are said to be existing precariously in various cities. The center at Santa Maria di Bagni consists of the whole village, set aside for the purpose by the Italian authorities. Once a summer seaside resort, the villas occupied by 2,000 non-Italian Jews are not unattractive, though badly lacking in furniture. Page 13. The reception given to our subcommittee there was similar to that at many other centers in Germany and elsewhere visited by our members. 600 to 700 of the community marched in military fashion carrying banners. A cohort of small children marching in pairs carried a banner with the slogan "Down with the white paper." Clearly the demonstration was not spontaneous, but carefully organized. One group of young men, who it was said represented the more turbulent section of the community, carried a banner to the effect that the committee was an insult to the Jewish nation. Usually at other centers the banners demanded free immigration into Palestine, a Jewish state, the end of the White Book, sick. The subcommittee also visited another settlement on the coast in pleasant surroundings, Santa Maria di Lucca, containing nearly 2,000 non-Italian Jews, the majority of whom, as at the other camp to which reference has been made, were young people. The night was spent there, and the next morning, it was found that 7 tires of the committee's cars had been cut. Such unfortunate incidents are mentioned merely as evidence of the intense feeling against remaining in centers even in attractive surroundings, and of the almost fanatical love for Palestine. 43. The Italian government and people are friendly to these non-Italian Jews. But Italy, in her present economic condition, cannot assimilate them even if they wish to remain within her borders. There is no desire on the part of Italian Jews to emigrate. 44. We have referred to these people as non-Italian Jews, for it is impossible to classify them as displaced persons and migrants. The majority of them have made their way over the frontier into Italy, and regard the country only as a point of departure for Palestine. Greece. 45. In Greece, there are some 10,000 Jews, survivors of a pre-war population of 75,000. Of the largest community of 56,000 at Salonika, only some 2,000 survive. During the Nazi occupation, the great majority of Jews were deported. A few remained in hiding. The survivors are now scattered over the country. The largest communities are in Athens and Salonika. Fundamentally, there is no anti-Semitism. Practically all Jewish property was confiscated, however, and though legislation directed to restitution has been enacted, the process will inevitably be difficult and may complicate relations between Jews and the surrounding population. There are acute economic difficulties. About half of the Jewish population is in receipt of assistance. A lack, page 14, of balance in the small communities, where the majority of the survivors are men, adversely affects the prospects of family life. The estimated number of potential emigrants ranges up to 50%, depending upon the estimator. Much will depend on the progress of economic recovery. Belgium. 46. The pre-war Jewish population was 90,000. It is now 33,000, of whom 6,000 are German and Austrian refugees, and 2,000 are recent immigrants. The authorities are helpful to the Jews, and the status of the German and Austrian refugees has been legalized. There is no tendency to large-scale emigration. Netherlands. 47. The pre-war Jewish population, including refugees, was approximately 150,000. There are now some 30,000, including 6,000 refugees of German, Austrian, and other nationalities. Although granted temporary asylum, these refugees have not yet been given rights of permanent residence. The attitude of the Dutch government is helpful to the Jews, and there is no evidence of any strong desire to emigrate. Switzerland. 48. In Switzerland, a country which provided asylum for some 35,000 Jews, mostly from France and Italy, there are now about 10,500 Jewish refugees, 24,500 or so, having returned to their country of origin or residence. The policy of Switzerland has been to afford temporary refuge and to allow transit. In addition, it is indicated that some 4,000 of these refugees, may remain if funds are provided for their support, but that it cannot absorb the others. Page 1. Appendix 3. Estimated Jewish population of Europe. Table A. Country. 1939. Total. 1946. Total. Native. Refugee and displaced. Nationality of refugee and displaced. Albania. 200. 300. 50. 250. Mainly Austrian and Yugoslav. Austria. 60,000. A. 15,000. 7,000. 8,000. 73% Polish. 11% Hungarian. 6% Czech and 6% Romanian. Belgium. 90,000. 33,000. 25,000. 8,000. Mainly German, Austrian, and Polish. Bulgaria. 50,000. 45,000. 45,000. Czechoslovakia. 315,000. B. 65,000. C. 60,000. C. 5,000. Mainly Polish, some Hungarian. Denmark. 7,000. 5,500. 5,500. Finland. 2,000. 1,800. 1,800. France. 320,000. 180,000. 160,000. 20,000. Mainly German, Austrian, and Polish. Germany. 215,000. D. 94,000. 20,000. 74,000. 85% Polish. 5% Hungarian. 4% Lithuanian. 3% Romanian. Greece. 75,000. 10,000. 10,000. Holland. 150,000. 30,000. 24,000. 6,000. Over 80% German and Austrian. Hungary. 400,000. E. 200,000. F. 200,000. F. Italy. 50,000. 46,000. 30,000. 16,000. 75% Polish. 7% Romanian. 5% Czech. 5% Hungarian. Luxembourg. 3,500. 500. 500. Norway. 2,000. 1,000. 750. 250. Mostly German. Poland. 3,351,000. 80,000 G. 80,000 G. Romania. 850,000. H. 335,000. I. 320,000. I. 15,000. Mainly Polish. Yugoslavia. 75,000. 11,000. 11,000. Total. Table A. 6,015,700. 1,153,100. 1,600,000. 152,500. Page 2. Table B. Country. 1939. 1946. Total asterisk. Total. Native. Refugee and displaced. Nationality of refugee and displaced. United Kingdom. 340,000. 350,000. 300,000. 50,000. 90% German and Austrian. Portugal. 3,500. 4,000. 3,500. 500. Various nationalities. Soviet Union. 3,550,000. J. 2,665,000. 2,500,000. 165,000. 150,000 Polish. 15,000 Hungarian. Spain. 4,500. 4,500. 4,000. 500. Various nationalities. Sweden. 7,500. 19,500. 7,500. 12,000. Mainly Polish, German, and Austrian. Switzerland. 25,000. 28,500. 18,000. 10,500. Mainly Polish, German, and Austrian. Total. Table B. 3,930,500. 3,071,500. 2,833,000. 238,500. Total, Table A. 6,015,700. 1,153,100. 1,600,000. 152,500. Total for Europe. 9,946,200. 4,224,600. 3,833,600. 391,000. A. In 1937, the Jewish population of Austria was approximately 192,000. By the outbreak of the war, the emigration of over 100,000, together with persecution and deportations, had reduced the number to some 60,000. B. The figure refers to the Jewish population within pre-Munich boundaries, when the Jews of Czechoslovakia numbered about 360,000. By September 1939, due mainly to emigration, the number had fallen to approximately 315,000. C. Does not include such Jewish survivors as have remained in the Carpatho-Ukraine, this territory now in the Soviet Union. D. According to the census of June 1933, the Jewish population of Germany totaled 499,682. By September 1939, the emigration of something over 200,000, persecution, and natural population decline had reduced the number to around 215,000. E. The figure refers to the Jewish population within pre-Munich boundaries. Asterisk. The figures in this column include refugee as well as native Jews. Page 3. F. These figures do not include an estimated 15,000 prisoners of war, now in the Soviet Union, who are expected ultimately to be repatriated. G. These figures do not include an estimated 150,000 Polish Jews in the Soviet Union, to whom the option of repatriation has been made available. H. Inclusive of the Jewish population of Bessarabia and Bukovina, which are now in the Soviet Union. I. Does not include an estimated 40 to 45,000 survivors in Bessarabia and Bukovina. The pre-war Jewish population within present Romanian boundaries was approximately 520,000. Included in the 1946 figure of 335,000 are 40,000 formerly residing in the two ceded provinces. J. Includes the 1939 Jewish population of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, estimated at about 250,000. Page 1. Appendix 4. Palestine. Historical background. The First World War. Before the First World War, the area today identified as Palestine had no separate existence as a single administrative unit within the Turkish Empire. Its population consisted of some 689,000 persons, of whom about 85,000 were Jews. The remainder were an Arabic-speaking people, racially mixed, but linguistically and culturally akin to the peoples of Syria, Mesopotamia, the Arabian Peninsula, and Egypt. The great majority of the Palestinian Arabs were Muslims, somewhat less than 10% being Christian. The economy of the land was overwhelmingly agricultural, and the standard of living was low. During the course of the First World War, which brought a British military occupation of Palestine, various commitments relating directly or indirectly to that area were made by the British and the other Allied and associated governments. The Hussein McMahon letters of 1915 to 1916 promised British assistance to the Arab peoples in freeing themselves from the Turks and in establishing their independence. The limitations and restrictions placed upon this promise have always been held by the British government to have excluded the area of Palestine. The Arab leaders, however, have insisted that Arab independence was promised there as elsewhere. In 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration, stating that it viewed with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and would endeavor to facilitate the achievement of this object, although nothing should be done which might prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. The French and Italian governments endorsed the declaration in 1918, and a joint resolution of Congress in 1922 gave formal United States sanction to the ideal of the Jewish national home. This term, national home, was new to international law and subject to varied interpretations. It appears certain that no one in 1917 contemplated the immediate creation of a Jewish state to rule over the large Arab majority in Palestine. But many responsible persons in the British and United States governments and among the Jewish people believed that a considerable Jewish majority might develop in Palestine in the course of time, and that a Jewish state might thus be the ultimate outcome of the Balfour Declaration.